Round number one of the GT Sprint Challenge 1 week ago was full of action, all up and down the grid. Podium spots were absolutely up for grabs and in demand. What will we see here at Imola for race number two of the RCI GT Sprint Challenge Season 8? Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Lee, joined by Tim Peck and Kevin Boss today. We're going three wide in the box, hopefully not on the racetrack. And of course, as always, Stewie behind the cameras. Tim Peck and Kevin Boss, welcome in to this stream. And Tim, it was a fantastic race number one. A lot of drivers all fighting over top five spots.
Yeah, it was a brilliant race one. I really enjoyed the fight out at the front, and already today in practice from the times we can do, it's going to be a very similar situation. Hugo Morales is someone who's been coming up through the races recently, and I expect a good result from them today. They're currently second on the leaderboard as it stands right now, Jesse, but I did notice them go into the wall about a minute ago on the screen, so hopefully that won't be their fortune today. But Hugo Morales, I'd say, is my driver to look out for today. Had a stunning race last week, and well, all of those guys up in the top 5, even the top 10 are looking like they're in for a good chance of a podium.
Certainly is the case. One race down, a lot to go. It's RCI's longest weekly series that we've done in over 2+ years. A lot of rounds, and only on round number 2. Kevin, we're going to go down to you. Welcome aboard. Welcome on the team as well. And, round number 2, a lot of points up for grabs today. Will we see a repeat of a week one performance from the likes of Joona Savolainen and Jardier, if Jardier is indeed even here this week? Or will we see a different host of players up front?
Well, thank you very much for the welcome. I think it might be a little bit different than last week, seeing as how much tighter Imola is as a circuit. Also, I saw Jardier did sign out for this week, so we'll see at least a couple different people at the front.
Certainly the case. Thank you, Kevin, for that. Absolutely right. Geiger also, the number 5 car in 4th place, finished 4th 1 week ago to grab that spot, also not here as well. So interesting, all of that going away. You're going to see a good mix. Like Kevin said, Tim, anybody strike you as a front runner that may have not been at Silverstone a week ago?
I don't know. I think anyone can really come out of the woodwork today. We'll obviously see after qualifying who's likely to be pushing towards the front in terms of times on track. But Joona Savolainen, obviously a well-known driver, definitely not one coming out of the woodwork, but they're out on the track right now. They've got that prime spot in qualifying too. They're out ahead of the pack, have all of the open air in front of them. They'll be hoping to get a really good lap in today and just start towards the front. But honestly, I think it could be anyone's game tonight. I have to agree with Kevin here, Jess, in that anyone can take this home. We've seen in the past people come up from everywhere, and actually one driver I was watching earlier in practice was Giorgio Migazzi, because they had quite a good run in practice, and I seem to remember from last week they were on the camera a lot, just climbing through the field towards the 20th position. They were sort of floating up there then between 20th and 10th as well, so I'd keep an eye on them tonight because I'll be see what they can do here at Imola.
Excellent insight as we are in qualifying. 10 minutes. You guys know the drill by now. Pretty standard qualifying affair. You got 10 minutes to set the quickest lap you can. All the cars on the track are pros, of course. Other splits, as always, available at racerci.com. No matter what your skill level, this just happens to be the best of the best. We ride on board from the visor cam of Joona Savolainen, the incorrectly named, getting slower every day Mercedes AMG, won the race going away 1 week ago. I left that broadcast and I gave a very interesting statistic that I think bears repeating. Savolainen has raced here more than a dozen times in RCI competition in anything from GT3 machinery to Spec Cup competition. He's only ever won one race here. A lot of DNFs. Will the track play nicely today for the man in command of this championship? Well, that remains to be seen. First laps out there and trying to gain everything they can. Not a lot of time for mistakes here, Tim. Fairly sizable racetrack. Got to get it right the first time.
Oh, absolutely. But it's also the case like that in any qualifying we have here on a Friday, Jesse, because you only get 10 minutes to do qualifying. At best, that's what, 4 or 5 laps that you have a real chance of getting a hot lap in there, and you need to make sure you nail it because you can't be sure what's going to come in your way on track. You can already see here, Junior South Line, they're about to finish their first lap, and it has looked like a good one so far, but on the track map, you can see they're approaching that number 11 car. So they do need to make sure that they stay in that open air if they want to continue setting these good times. So 140.8, that's a great start for the number 100 Mercedes. It's going to put them towards the front of the leaderboard. Valentin Barrage come in for 140.75 as well, just 800ths in front of them. So already some tight competition. But as we go through qualifying, obviously, those times will get a lot quicker as well. And Kevin, I was actually going to ask you about this. Every week, me and Jesse talk about the importance of qualifying and if there's any strategy to it. But if you're one of these cars out on track right now that's trying to qualify, what's going through your head? Are you trying to bank a great lap early, or are you going to see if you can lower the fuel a bit and go for a really fast lap at the end?
Well, I'd say personally, with a short 10-minute qualifying, I'll just fill up the car for 10 minutes and do as many laps as I can, because the track will constantly improve, even though your tires will degrade a little bit. I think it's better to have the tire in optimum temperature, pressure, all that before. If you could do a low fuel run, but then you might run into the problem of not having the tires in the optimum temperature and pressure window.
Interesting. And yeah, I think I have to agree with you. In 10-minute qualifying, it's all about just making sure you have the best attempts at getting in the best lap time. We've seen here a couple of times, especially in more wet qualifying sessions, we've got a little bit caught out, maybe invalidating their laps, and then they're not being able to set a good time either. So continuing qualifying now at the front, it's still the same two people. You've got Barner in the 2.56, they're just 5 tenths off the pace, and Grund just 6 tenths off as well. Hugo Morales slots in 5th. So a couple of drivers here that have probably set their banker lap, just a lap to put them towards the top of the leaderboard. But now, Jesse, obviously, it's the time to start getting the pedal down and pushing for that quickest lap.
Yeah, you know, Kevin made a very good point, I thought, earlier, talking about the track always improving, the tires degrading, things like that. That's absolutely true. Just because the track says optimum doesn't mean that it's perfect. It can continue to improve on a percentile basis. Even if it is already optimum, it can continue to rubber up and lose rubber, respectively. If it was wet, or you get the point, late in the evening, it can basically ungrip itself. That's a technical term. So just because it says that doesn't mean that the track isn't doing something, going through a mood swing. Barrier still the quickest, though, with that 40.750, but Hugo Merrill's second place now. The Frenchman has got themselves 62 100ths out of pole position, and most importantly for them, on the front row of the grid. That puts your championship leader back on the second row with Konstantin Soldatov in that 911. They had an incredibly quiet but incredibly well-ran race. Number 1 finished inside the top 5, looking to do even more damage today. Charlie Chamberlain up in the top 5 as well in that Honda. This is a good Honda racetrack. Can't overlook that at all either.
Yeah, and Hugo Morales just slotting into that second place there. That's almost what I'm expecting to see from them today. Obviously, I talk about the fact that they're one of the drivers to look out for quite a lot, but Hugo Morales quite likes the track here around Imola and is often seen towards that front row. So Valentin Barrage in the lead, Hugo Morales in second, Junior Southline in third. That looks like a front three that sort of speaks Imola to me, and I'll be excited to see what they can do once on the track as well, because right now they're only split by 800ths of a second, Jesse, so that can get really tight once the race starts.
Tell you something else I've noticed as Horsey goes to 12th place, the quickest lap they've been able to run. Kevin, I've got a question. There's several cars, 22 cars, that have ran a valid lap, but even more so, 5 to 8 cars that have yet to set a lap. They've wasted 8 minutes in validating times. That's obviously a problem here, isn't it?
Definitely, with, as I said before, how tight the track is, you definitely want a good qualifying position in order to get out in front and not be, squashed within the pack going through the first couple turns. You really want to get at least upper midfield to try and get out, to try and stay out of trouble.
Follow-up question. Obviously, you have experience racing here. What are the problem turns in your mind?
For me personally, it's Acqua Minerali, just how easy you can lose the rear down there, especially in the second turn. But definitely at the start, the first two chicanes are going to be very, very interesting.
Excellent insight there. Simon goes into the top 10 positions there with that fight. Just doing well to get that car up a couple of spots. A couple of cars struggling here. I probably wouldn't have expected John Arazer in that 699 McLaren, the slowest of the cars to take time. 3 seconds off of the lead. No surprise, though, that the top couple are only separated by 8/100ths of a second tenth.
Yeah, I think the ones at the front here today are the ones, like I said, you'd expect to see at the front on a track like Imola. I'm surprised as well with you about a racer. There's someone that you'd think would be a lot higher up in the field. I'm wondering if being 3 seconds off the pace there, that is down to maybe a mistake they made on their quickest lap. Maybe they just can't really find the flow of the car right now. But I imagine that a racer coming towards the end of qualifying here has a chance to set a really, really good lap. And well, we've got 30 seconds left on the clock. Of course, you've got until the clock hits 0 to come over the line and do your final lap here. But either way, we're looking at most cars on track right now that have just come through that first sector. They're definitely not getting that final lap. So for most drivers out there, Jesse, this is now the lap that counts.
Yeah, it's very interesting, really, if you think about it. A lot of cars have already called it quits. I would say about a third of the grid are sitting in the pit lane, meaning that they've waved the white flag a little bit earlier. The Razor goes through. That was an improvement up to 22nd, but still a little over 2 seconds. So, yeah, and that was a 9/10 of a second gain on that one specific lap. Being hounded by, I believe that was Jordan Daly right behind them as well. Daly will be getting the benefit of the draft down some of these straights, but both those cars kind of out of position outside the top 15, unusual for them. Harley Chamberlain pointed out that Honda earlier. They're still inside the top 10. They're in 6 right now. That Honda tends to race very good. And this is another strange one for me, Face, because in the 95 Honda at the back, one of the few cars now that hasn't set a lap. What about that 11 Justice, by the way, also hasn't set a lap in the Aston Martin. This is all coming down to it. There is no more time. Flying laps, all of these counting here, and Barnabas does set a time good enough for a top 15.
You can see that Salvoline has taken back provisional pole at the front as well. A time of 1:40.522 for the Mercedes driver. Valentin Barrier trying to do a little bit better than that, about to cross the line now as well. They go back into pole position. They set a 1:40.4 as well. Grand slots into that third place slot. And most drivers now will have finished with their qualifying. Just a couple more to come across the line here, Jesse. But in terms of what's happened, I think what we can say is that Kevin was actually right with what was going to happen, in that there's not a lot of room, and you have to get that lap that you do right, because if you mess up your first couple of laps, you're getting tighter and tighter towards the end, and you want to be starting towards the front. You definitely don't want to be stuck at the back in this race. So qualifying really did matter here, and I think there's a lot of drivers that are going to be a little disappointed with their qualifying today.
Well, here's how it shook out after qualifying for round number 2 here. Valentin Barrier will take the fastest first and third sector. Quickest lap of all, a 40.405, good enough for pole. Juna Savalainen did rebound to retake the front row starting spot, outside pole for him. Grande in third place, and of course, Hugo Merrill's in fourth. That was quite a battle between all of them. Soldatov, Chamberlain, Aaron Trout, Foch, Simon Barnett is your top 10. The rest of the starting grid going by your screen. Quite interestingly, Hugo Merrill's had the quickest middle sector of all in that qualifying run. Very interesting, all of that. Quite frankly, I wonder how big that will play into this, in fact. The championship points, the pro field, well, this is basically how they shook out after race number 1. Juna Savalainen winning that race, had the fastest qualifying lap, and of course the quickest lap in the race. That's good enough for max points, 72. Jardier not here today, sitting on 58. Samir Foch is here today, has a little bit of work to do to get back onto the podium, 53 points for him. Leb not here today as well. Konstantin Soldatov, 44 points just inside the top 5. Valentin Berrier with a pole position has a few extra points to their name, but sitting on 40 right now. Horsey with 37 point, Borgosman 34. Hugo Merrills has work to do and is in the right position to get that done. 31 points in ninth, and Thomas with 28 points in the 10th place position, Tim.
And here how things are looking in the top 20. Dixon Chen has 25 points. They are in 11th place. Giorgio Migazi in 12th. They've got 23 points. And Jano Grand is in 13th with 21 points. Barnabas Fazecast is in 14th place. They're followed by Popsov in 15th. Simon is in 16th place with 15 points, just 1 point ahead of Starzak, who is in 17th with 14. They're 1 point ahead of Christian Bock in 18th, who's 1 point ahead of John Daly in 19th, who's also 1 point ahead of Scarmato in 20th. And the reason for that is because we're only one race in, Jesse.
Yeah, it sure is. And at risk of sounding like a broken record, John Arazer on 10 points outside the top 20, 21st place, 1 point behind them. Ornst, and you've got Lindrup, Justice, Pushkin, got Andre, Durrett, Koderman, Lele, and Climbs. That's your top 30. And of course, all of those drivers except Jan Climbs have points, but they're still in the championship. Anybody with a 0 still active in the series. Anybody with a dash has retired from the championship. Dan Edvardsen had a pretty horrible race number 1, elected to retire from the championship. Big loss there. Would have liked to have seen what Dan could have done in this series. They're also very close. Kevin, we'll go back down to you. You can't put too fine a point on this. Today could go a long way in determining a champion. It is a long way, however, to the end of the series. What's the strategy today if you're a main player inside that top 10? Maybe you start in the top 10 in this race today. Do you play it safe? Do you go for it? I need strats, Kevin.
I'd definitely play it more safe now. You don't really want to throw away a chance at a good result early by diving into a corner where you really shouldn't. Even though there is the drop round, you probably don't want to use that too early on in case you make a mistake later on where you're actively fighting for the championship win and you need the bigger points.
Well, I like to hear both sides of the coin. Let's go to Tim Peck. Do you agree with that assessment? Would you do it differently?
Yeah, I do have to agree. I think it's interesting that you mentioned the drop round there, Kevin, because of course, for a lot of drivers, they tend to now use that for a race they can't make. But at the same time, you can use it if you have one race where you've done particularly bad. You may have had an incident that's seen you go to the back of the pack. Of course, that will count as your drop round if you don't get a good result and you've competed in every other race. So the drop round is important. Obviously, a lot of drivers have now used it. You saw Jardier was one of those drivers in second place using their drop round here today. So I have to agree. I think maybe playing it a little bit safe. Obviously, you don't want to have an incident this early on that's going to see you waste that drop round or even lose a load of points. But at the same time, I think you do have to be quite aggressive. You need to make sure that you're out on track, you're making a mark out there, climbing for those high positions, because if you play it too safe, you find yourself slipping back through the pack. Maybe you get 10th place and 11th place or somewhere lower, and even though that's still a really good result, you're probably not bringing enough points to continue fighting at the top of the championship. So I think a lot of the drivers here, especially those in the top 5 right now, Barrier, Salvalainen, Grand, Merles and Soldatov, they're going to be looking to push as hard as they can, and hopefully for them, bring home a win or a podium.
Well, somebody has to play devil's advocate. I'll do that part today. I enjoy playing that role myself. And I'll say this, welcome into our live stewards who are with us on every Friday, an absolute armada of them today. And I fear that might be necessary at such a racetrack with so many cars. 27 took a qualifying time today. That is quite a lot of cars for a track that is quite narrow on some of the avenues. It could be recipe for disaster. I think avoiding disaster today is going to go a long way in determining a champion 6 weeks down the line. And I agree with the both of you. That is something, even in early days in this series, you have to be thinking about. If you are in the top 5, though, Tim, I agree with you 100%. You got to go for it. You've got to attack. If there's points on offer, It's on the table, and it certainly is here today. You have to go for it. This is a racetrack you can flat get after it. Well, we welcomed in the stewards. Let's welcome in you at home. How are you all doing in the chat on a Friday evening? Of course, we thank you for spending a little bit of your evening with us. We hope you're well wherever you are in the world. And of course, a big thank you to our partners that make this race and every race possible. AK Informatica Driver 61 and Fanatec. We'll talk more about them after the race tonight. Less than 20 subscribers away from hitting that 4,200 subscriber mark on YouTube. We'd very much like it if you drop a like and a subscribe sometime today. Of course, Monday Championship just ended, but we have sorts of racing coming up, including the Thursday Championship. Obviously, this is the Friday Championship. Night Owl continues. The Monday Championship Series is on as well, or it will be in a week or so from now. Open signups for that. RaceRCI.com, your destination. No matter what your skill level, we have a split for you. Maybe someday you show up here on the big screen. We'd love to talk about you. Tim Peck and I love talking about new drivers. And on that subject, Tim, a lot of new faces here in the Pro Series this season.
Yeah, we've got a lot of new faces here, and like you said, it's always interesting seeing them enter the new series as well, because you love to see new drivers show up, show us what they can do. We obviously get to build a story around you as well. We get to go and talk about, oh, we remember when they joined in Friday Champ Season 8, so it's always lovely to see new drivers, and of course that could be you in future races if you do sign up. Going back to this race though, Jesse, just looking at where Hugo Morales is starting right now, they're starting in 4th. Obviously, last week had a very good week at the beginning, but an instant later on the race pushed them all the way down into that 9th place position. They're going to be looking for a good start here, but they've got 3 cars in front of them as they approach the line right now. So I think at the front, it could be a bit of a scrap going down towards the first chicane.
It certainly could be, and look at that Lamborghini Grand in 3rd place. Could there be a push made from there? Starting around the outside here, if you can draw level, it could give you a better insight into the first couple of turns here. Will we see it? Either way, it is Barrier and Savalainen up front, the challenger and the champion, both looking for glory here. It's a long old way down the front straight, waiting for the flag man, the green flag in hand, waiting to get going. It seems to take forever, and it will do as they cross the bend and the green flag is out. The lights are on, and we're racing here at race number 2 at Imola, and it's a very nice start from Savalainen as they're going to be able to get out front just barely, and there comes back Barrier. Barrier hanging around the inside, but they're still side by side. They're 2 by 2, many rows deep as they all sort it out as they go past turn 3, as they will have to do.
Balancing Barrier manages to squeeze through, leaving Savalainen second. Already a bit of a gap building there as well. Valentin really pushing Savalainen to the limit. Further down the field, you can see cars going 2 and even 3 wide in places. There's someone, I'm not sure who that is, falling through the order, and there's a spin on the track as well. It looks like a couple of cars maybe got caught up in that as well, just having to slow down. You can see 2 of them just hanging back behind the pack where they got caught up in it. But continuing up the field, you can see a couple of 2 wide still going towards this left-hander here, and then they're about to approach Aquamunarali, so they're going to want to sort it out before then, because as Kevin mentioned earlier, you do not want to be going 2 and 3 wide through there. It's very, very risky if you try and do that through Aquamunarali. You can see the purple versus the black car here. The black's gone really, really wide as well. Will rejoin safely, but in terms of a start, that all played into Barrier's hands. That's exactly how they wanted that to go, Jesse.
Sure was. Oh, a couple of spins off here. One of the Lamborghinis off into the chicane. There was another car down to the inside. The original spin in the hairpin, that was Ishan Lele in the 8 that got spun around and very wisely parked it on the infield grass there. Was able to get away with that. I don't think there'd be a lot of damage, but perhaps a little bit more there done into the chicane. But nevertheless, everybody else streaming through, and other than that, I thought it was going to be a bigger mess than that, as they were still 2 by 2 bunched up going into turn 4 and 5, but somehow able to minimize the damage, at least for the time being. Valentin Barrier does lead this race. Samir Foch doing what Samir Foch does. That's marching to the front here.
Yeah, Foch took the inside for the first chicane there, managed to push her way up through the field. There's a yellow flag on the circuit in that sector 1 as well, so something again has happened on that first chicane. It looks like multiple cars
Oh,
involved. There's
Jordan
3 of
Daly
them. That's
involved.
Jordan Daly. Oh no, I'm not sure who else that is. That's a McLaren by the looks of it as well. But Jordan Daly looks like they're taking quite a hit there. It looks like it may have been quite a rough accident towards turn 1. Here's what's happening at the front. Judas Salvolani continues to chase Valentin Barrier. There's a 1.7 gap to Hugo Morales behind. And I think that's because Gran would have been the Lamborghini we saw parked on the right at the first lap of this race, Jesse.
Oh, right, you are. That was not Lele who was the car that was, oh, no, excuse me. That was the previous accident. I think you're right. I thought it was Simon in the 966, but you're absolutely right. It was Gran in the 404 Lamborghini, qualified inside the top 5 and found themselves backwards, facing the wrong direction on the chicane. Right, you are. But going down to Kevin Savalainen, not giving up this spot lightly, and Savalainen trying to challenge for the lead here. And this might be the best shot that Savalainen has.
Really, now with not having the pressure from behind, he can totally focus on looking in front of Barrier. Don't really know where he's going to look to actually overtake. Tosa might be a good point, but yeah, this is going to be an excellent position for Savalainen.
Tim, what do you do here? Do you get really aggressive? Do you wait for a mistake? What are you doing?
I mean, at this point in time, there's 56 minutes to end the race, Jesse. I'm just going to continue following Barrier. I know I've got the pace to do so. Definitely not holding me up. Salvador has gone off track massively there.
That's gone real badly.
That is not how I want to do it, but it looks like a DC from Salvador. That's so unfortunate as well, because I was about to say, in such a prime spot, just follow Barrier, see what the pace is like. If you're a lot quicker, you can look for an overtake, but to me it looked like they're basically similarly paced, and if I'm Savlon there, I'm following Barrier until probably there's like 20 minutes left, and then I'm just hoping that either a mistake has happened or I can start to look for maybe an overtake somewhere after I've sized up how they drive, I've learned what they're going to do. But Salvolani not going to be happy, had a DC there that sent them way off track. Luckily didn't hit Barrier in the process. What happened to Barnabas? Phase cast here, pulled to the side of the road. Looks like they have returned to the pits for some reason. Maybe a mechanical fault, may have damage on the car they can't drive with. But either way, Jesse, an end to Salvolani's race fairly quickly. That's got to be great for Barrier, who now has no threat for seconds.
Your championship leader out of the race. It certainly seems so. Connection issues plaguing Juna Savalainen 1 week after a spectacular and dominant victory at Silverstone. Today, a very different story. Barrier finds himself out front. Hugo Merrells, who I thought, by the way, while that was all going on, was going to get passed by Konstantin Soldatov. That pass now has happened just about a lap later than I expected it to happen. The 911 up into P2. Hugo Merrells down to third. Chamberlain fourth. Aaron Trout in P5 right about now. We saw the 95 have their issues. That car was very clearly either impacted by another car or the wall, maybe both, considering where that incident seemed to have occurred. A couple of big outs here early in this race. We already saw Jordan Daly has retired that car. The 197 is out as well. Dixon Chin in the 62 McLaren. That car is pitting, but I suspect that might be the required pit stop of the day. Of course, every car has to make a required stop at some point. There is a 25-second stop required, as there always is when the pit window is open. It's definitely open now. A lot of racing going on through the pack. John Arazer, who did not qualify as well as they would have liked, has some work to do and is now getting hounded by Jan Climbs in both of these cars out of position from him.
Yeah, I think John Arazer has had not a great start to this week, really, for them. Obviously, there was someone that we expect to see at the front. Now they're struggling to hold on to that 18th position, but that could be down to the fact I believe the 699 McLaren was one of the cars we saw facing the wrong way at the beginning. As you can see again, Climbs looking towards the inside, seems to have a lot more pace than Arazer as well. Maybe Arazer's got some damage that is slowing the acceleration of that car down, but Climbs not able to get alongside, will duck back behind the McLaren 4 now, but they're approaching that long start-finish straight, Jesse, where if you can get the slipstream right, you will just soar straight past it. It looks like the Porsche is looking to do that now, exiting out of the final corner onto the start-finish straight, although the McLaren seems to just be about holding its own here. The Razor will still be ahead for now. But interesting that we talk about the pit stops here. Obviously, Dixon Chen pitting this early, maybe tactical, to just try and get out of some of the dirty air, put yourself behind the rest of the track and
my
look towards
goodness!
it. Ascend from climbs there as well, up the inside. Eraser is still alongside them.
Oh,
Little
touch!
bumping between them as they approach the next corner, but it looks like Eraser has just fallen behind now as Climb sends himself again down the inside into the chicane. Already Lele is coming up around the outside as well. Can Eraser hold on to this, or are they going to lose 2 positions here? Eraser just about holds on, but the number 8 looming already. But going back to what you were saying, Jesse, obviously we were talking about the early pit stop from Dixon Chen. Sometimes it is tactical to do this early. I imagine that was sort of forced by damage here, but I'm interested to know from Kevin's perspective, in terms of pit times, we talk about it a lot, Jesse. Kevin, what do you think is the best time to pit? You've got an hour-long race. Obviously, most people do it on that 30-minute mark, but are you someone who looks for an undercut or an overcut, or are you just going to be getting as close to that 30 minutes as possible for the pit stop?
Usually get it around the 30-minute mark. As we just see someone go off, I think that's John Eraser having been touched into that corner. As we see now, Ashan Lele seems to punt him in the rear, yeah, and that's why he goes off. But yeah, myself, I usually look at the 30-minute mark, just because I'll then have the fresher tyres. I can have a look more on what the weather's going to do, and gives me more options.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that's a good thing to do. Of course, someone else now is in the pits. Was that Dixon Chen again that we just saw on our screen? Maybe my eyes might just be playing tricks on me there. But either way, I think the early pit stop, Dixon Chen seems to still be in the pits because they're 2 laps down according to the thing. No, they're not. They're definitely out on track. Ignore me. They're definitely out on track now. But either way, the early pit stops is something we've seen quite a lot, especially in the previous championship as well. People tend to pit quite early. I know something we saw was people pitting around that 45 minutes left of the race mark, and it just meant that they had all this open air. They could climb through loads of positions in one go. It just left them very, very vulnerable towards the end of the race. So a lot of strategies that can come out and play here, Jesse. And again, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. If you're one of the drivers right now, what are you thinking in terms of pit stops?
Well, I'm thinking that was an incredibly physical start of the race is what I'm thinking. First of all, I would probably not want to be stuck behind a car right about now, especially if I'm in this group. If I'm Thomas Ehrentraut right now, I'm pretty happy with where I am, and I probably wouldn't stop. I'd probably go, well, just sort of what Kevin was talking about, halfway into the race, maybe a little bit later, depending on how far forward I was. But if I'm back in the melee, like some of the other cars we see, we already saw so much contact. Just from a defensive standpoint, I'd probably pit a little bit earlier just to get myself out of that. The earlier, the better with those sort of things. It sort of equalizes over time, obviously. That's probably what I would do. I actually want to go back to Kevin. I want to ask him an ethical question, something that we don't really talk about much. We have no idea if John Eraser had damage. Maybe he's just slower on certain parts of the racetrack. We're going to very quickly go back to the lap 2 incident. This is the one where 2 cars got sideways in front, and I think Jordan Daly comes in here and gets cleaned up as well. Some more contact there. So there were 4 cars involved and a 5th car going off into the dirt to avoid. Of course, the 197 has retired. Several cars have retired at this point. But Kevin, going back to the Eraser Climbs battle earlier, I just wanted to ask, ethical question: if you have damage, do you feel you still have the right? I'm not saying that John Eraser did have damage because we don't know that, but simply asking, if a car has damage, is it ethical to continue to battle and hold up the car behind you?
It's definitely a difficult question. I'd say it depends on how damaged the car is. If you notice yourself that you're losing like 5-6 seconds a lap due to damage, then I would suggest you go into the pits and get some repairs done. Otherwise, you're not only slowing yourself down and being a danger to yourself, but also to everyone else on the track. If it's just a little bit of damage, I'd probably continue on, because if it's only like a couple tenths, anything can happen in a race, and if you then go into the pits early for repairs, then it could put you way at the back and you've got no chance of return.
I was just quite curious about that. That's not something that comes up often. I'm quite convinced that Eraser didn't have damage, but was just a little bit outpaced by Climbs there. But nobody had ever asked that question on this broadcast before, and I was quite curious what your position was on it. Speaking of John Eraser, that car, after the contact with Lele, That car has returned to the garage and has also retired. I mentioned at the top of the show something very important. This is a physical racetrack. A lot of these wider turns turn into single file affairs, and if you haven't sorted it out amongst yourselves, you get into these accidents, and we have seen a lot of those early. Tim Stewart's working overtime here.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's been said quite a lot already, is that Imola's just one of those tracks where you've got to get your elbows out a little bit and be quite daring, but at the same time, accidents are definitely bound to happen because it's got a lot of tight corners and it's got a lot of straights where you definitely don't want to be lining up next to someone, even though it's so tempting when you're on a straight to be trying to do the overtake here. As a car goes towards the exit there, it looks like the Porsche, but just not able to get enough grip. I believe that was Climbs going for a move on the Ferrari ahead of them, it was, but not quite able to get the grip around the outside of the corner there. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, Jesse, it's so tempting to try and get alongside people in a lot of these straights, but a lot of the corners at the end are very tight chicanes, which can actually be quite dangerous if you're still alongside them. So you do have to be really careful around Imola, and the stewards that are live stewarding here today will be having a very tough job, I imagine, just assessing all the incidents that have happened so far in this race.
We're watching Andrei Timofeyev here go off the racetrack battling Climbs. This is for 19th place. Climbs going up the inside. Will the Porsche have the motor going down the hill? No, they will not. The Ferrari that has superior straight line speed, able to pull just back out in front. Further frustrating Climbs for the moment, at least. You know, I was looking up and down the grid. Harley Chamberlain now in P3 has gotten by Hugo Merrill's in the 51 Ferrari. So that Honda that typically does well here, racing even better, the 725 in a podium spot. A further second lost to Valentin Berrier by virtue of Konstantin Soldatov in second place. That was 3.5 seconds the last time I had looked. That was several laps ago. Berrier in control of this race, has the fastest lap as well, looking to do max points, max damage in the standings after today. Thomas continuing to have a huge fight on their hands as well. They're on the backside of this train, or should I say kind of in the middle. They might be the hot dog in the sandwich here, as Barnett with 56, actually the caboose on this wagon. Behind them, Samir Foch has gained a further spot. They were 8th last we looked. They are up 1 spot, but a huge bump there by Hugo Merrill's, and that has thrown them into the throes of Thomas in the 999. That should be an easy peasy pass, and is. What will Barnett do here? Oh, thinking about making a move, and does go down the inside. It's going to be close. The Ferrari goes off the racetrack, and that was very, very close between all of them, but somehow they just made that work.
That was a huge opportunity for Barnett as well. They saw the door was left open and just went for it too. Hugo Merrill's falls 2 more positions, not been able to find the pace in the first quarter of this race so far, just struggling a little bit maybe with the Ferrari keeping it up to speed, and all of that has helped Samir Foch to close that gap a little bit as well. And well, if there's one thing that we know about Samir, it's that they will continue to try and climb through the field. Definitely still a contender for a podium position today if they can close these gaps a bit more. Brand, who we saw at the beginning of the race, had a bit of an accident going round, coming out of the final chicane. They're now behind the Ghostman, 2 tenths off, looking towards the rear of that McLaren, trying to see if they can find their way back through. And again, it's still early days in this race, Jesse. It's definitely not all over yet. A lot can happen this time. We have seen people climb from around these positions, from 16th, 17th, up into that top 10 and even higher before. So Brand right now got a bit of climbing to do, but could definitely get back into that top 10 at least. They've just got to get their foot down a little bit and try and find these places quickly, because what you don't want to do get stuck behind the car for a really, really long time, especially if you're someone that's got a lot of pace here.
Justice trying to make a spot around the inside. Aqua Minerale, not the easiest place to get that done, but they've absolutely done that on Coderman in the 889. Position gain for Justice, the last turn Motorsport number 11, up 1 spot as several cars going off there in front of them. That's races in the 28. Actually, no, that's not, in fact, races in the 28. I misspoke there. A couple of penalties coming through, though. That can only mean one thing. Stewards have been quite busy. Racing incident between the 62 and the 92 on lap 1, and a 5-second penalty for the 256 for an overtake with contact on the 966. That also on lap 1. We understand the stewards are still looking into several matters involving the first couple of laps. Will let them to it, but Barnett with an early penalty here. This is the rear bumper of the Brazilian Borgosman's car. Looking back at, I just realized, by the way, that Yano Gran, as I've been referring, is actually Spanish. Wouldn't that make them Grande?
Yeah, probably. So we apologise if we've heard your name wrong there. Grande or Grand, let us know how you pronounce it.
They call me the Butcher for a reason.
But either way, yeah, it could be Grande, it could be Grand, it could be Grand. We'll ask them after the race how they choose to pronounce their name and get that right. But the Lamborghini, you can see from the rear of the Ghostman here, very, very close behind, but still not quite able to find a way through here. And as you can see as well, on the timings on the left-hand side, there's a train starting to form, starting in that 12th position, going all the way down. Grand is currently at the back of that train. They want to be at the front. And even if you look past 12 as well, Kodeman's just a second off the number 11 ahead of them as well. So there's definitely potential there for Grand and even any of them to climb back through the field if they want to. But goes from there, took a little bit of curbing, but that's kind of what we have to do with that chicane. And that's one of those chicanes where I think a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it, a lot of people love to hate it and hate to love it as well. You've got to just throw yourself into it. A lot of the time as well, it's just making sure you hit it perfectly, because otherwise it can really spit you out. And Grand there actually pulling into the pit lane. I'm wondering if this is the tactical early pit I was talking about, Jesse. Pit now whilst you're at the back of the train. Do as many fast laps as possible where you've got no one in front of you, and then hopefully by the time everyone else pits, you're a lot further up the order than you were 10, 20 minutes ago.
Certainly the case. I was right earlier, by the way. I do beg your pardon. I was all 6s and 7s. But they are racing for a top 10 spot. That was races in the black McLaren up in front, I saw. Just very confused in my old age. Justice has caught them for a top 10 spot. Kevin, I've got to ask a question. Hugo Merrill's in the 51 Ferrari is going backwards, started up near the front and has lost at least 4 or 5 different positions. Samir Foch didn't have as good as qualifying as you would expect from a driver of his caliber, but he's marching to the front. They've met somewhere in the middle now. What could possibly be the difference between the two Ferraris?
It could be damage for Merles, as he has been falling back slowly but surely the entire time. Could be because of an incident in the first couple of laps that he got just a little bit his focus out. I know how that works. Like, you get an accident and sometimes it could take like 20 minutes to get your head back fully into the game. Bosch has been rampant this entire race, pushing forward the entire time. Might be a bit of the headspace, or it could be damage, one of the two.
Very interesting there as these two continue to go at it. This is Climbs and Durrett for 17th place. Again, at least going in the right direction. And very interesting to see all these little battles. Contrary to what we saw a week ago, where it was 2 cars pairing off and having a fight for the entire race, seems to be triplets or maybe even more at different points throughout this. And oh, it's going to be a squirrely moment. The 725 is going to go off. Was that contact from Aaron Trout? I think it might have been. Harley Chamberlain's going to lose at least 1 spot, maybe 2. And that was very close stuff. Absolutely no contact reported, but let's take a look here. Could that have just been a loose condition of the Honda? One BMW gets through there and continues on, taking a top podium position. Scary moment for Harley Chamberlain.
Very scary indeed, but I've got to say, I don't think there was contact. It looked like Chamberlain just lost grip. They got very, very close, but I think if Aaron Trout was to make contact with Chamberlain from behind there, then we'd have seen Harley go flying towards a wall at full speed. I don't think there was contact between that BMW and the Honda, but it looks like Thomas has just been on the right path as well. They started a lot further down in the order. They've just been taking these positions one by one, and now they find themselves on that podium position. Seem to have a lot of pace behind them as well. You see Hugo Morels going down towards the inside of this is towards the outside, sorry, but it is, and they make contact. Barnett catches the rear of Hugo there, which sends Hugo just behind Foch again, but I don't know. That's a tight one. That could be racing incident. Hugo seems to think that it's Barnett's fault. I'm not sure, but we'll have a race replay here. See if Barnett is at fault here. Just catching
Look
the
at
end of it, so
Samir.
it's hard to tell. But again, Samir Foch, eyes facing forward, pushes their way through and just waits for the door to be open, takes it instantly. Samir Foch up into 5th place, Barnett into 6th. Hugo falls down into 7th place. It's not been Hugo Morell's race so far. They just seem to be going backwards, but Barnett now looks to be trying to get the position back there. Very agitated that Foch has got through, and Hugo seems agitated as well that Barnett got the better end of them. Then you can see already looking towards the outside. Actually, Barnett's going to let Hugo back through. They've decided that actually that was their fault and that Hugo deserves that track position. So the switch around from those 2 cars there sorts that out. But either way, with the pace Foch has had, can Hugo now catch back up? Or is that it? Is Foch just going to disappear off into the distance, catch Harley Chamberlain, take another podium? Maybe they even catch up to Thomas.
Well, I hate to say this for Hugo Morell's sake, but I think Samir Foch is setting sail, already back in the top 5 right now. And this is more Samir Foch territory, I would say. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Samir Foch has 2 different switch positions, attack and off. And, well, very clearly he's in the attack position thus far. And that was just an unfortunate situation that set up that move to get 2 birds with 1 stone. Barnett and Merrill's make contact, and just ever so slight, and one of them goes off, and then Samir Foch is put in this dilemma of, well, do I play it safe or do I go for it? Well, the answer is go for it, get a top 5 spot, take those positions away, and that has happened. Justice has also made the move into the top 10, but I think that's because one of the cars in front of them have pitted. Something that Rico in our chat has pointed out, of course, we are reading chat as always here on RCI TV. I'm going to mention this earlier. Christian Bach in the Nissan GTR, the fan favorite car, was up inside the top 10. They had a race to forget round number 1 as contact here between Justice and Races again. They both go skidding and somehow get back onto the racetrack, but now a couple of cars behind them, Coderman and Borgosman, now find themselves in this fray. But I was going to say about Bach, they have had some sort of issue. I don't know exactly what happened, but they lost a ton of spots. They were inside the top 10. The GTR, for the 2nd race in a row, absolutely no love.
Yeah, the GTR has struggled so far this season. Continue to watch this fight though, but Ghostman and Codeman had a bit of a scrap in that last corner there, but Ghostman managed to get the better end of it. Continues in that 11th place position. Now looks to try and find 10th as we approach Akku and Raleigh. They're looking towards the inside. Not going to happen here, of course. It's a risky corner to go for a move on, and I think it's safer for Ghostman now just to continue maybe following this train for a bit, seeing if you can climb some positions. We've got 4 minutes left until the expected pit stop time for most drivers. A couple of drivers have already pitted. Got the Lamborghinis down there, Mercedes, 2 McLarens and a Porsche have decided to pit so far. They'll be looking to try and bunny hop some positions. Hopefully they'll have done the undercut, and well, for them, hopefully they've done the undercut, found themselves a lot higher. One person will be looking for that is Grande, sorry. I'm wondering where they were. I can't exactly remember where they were before pit stops, but I believe it was around that 16th position, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong. So we'll see whether it has worked out for the 404 there, and the Ghostman pitting as well. So coming towards the pit time for a lot of these cars, they'll be deciding when to do it. One person who doesn't have to worry about it too much is Valentin Barrier. They've got a 4-second gap to Sol and Tov at the front. They can basically decide when they want to pit, and I imagine it will be as late as possible when they start to feel like their pace is dropping off, because right now they don't have to worry about any traffic ahead of them.
Well, I'll tell you something else that I find very interesting. We've had a lot of lap 1 incidents looked at, and so far no additional penalties other than the one already given to the 256 of Barnett. A warning for car 92 though for avoidable contact with car 240. Unavoidable contact racing incident between the 197 and the 8. Racing incident unavoidable contact between the 8 and the 43. Racing incident unavoidable contact between the 28, the 329, and the 92. All of those incidents, folks, lap 1, turn 7. That was that kerfuffle we saw very early on at the follow-up incident that we saw the 197 and all them involved in. A lot of very early incidents, but no penalties other than the one thus far.
And that is sometimes the case. We see a big accident, we assume there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of penalties coming out from it, but actually in reality it's probably just that one driver's accidentally caused a bit too much problem for a lot of different people, and at the end of the day they don't deserve penalties, they just were in a fortunate position and unfortunate time. Hugo Morales hits, and interesting that one is for me because they hadn't fallen off Foch. Whilst we were expecting that Foch had a lot more pace in them, we're going to be pushing a bigger gap to Hugo. Hugo was just 4 tenths behind Foch as they entered the pits there, so maybe they found a little bit of a halfway boost in their pace. They look very good in qualifying, of course. They put themselves, I believe they qualified in 4th place, just a couple of tenths behind Salvalainen, who was on pole position for this race, but then we've seen them fall back through the order as the race has continued. I'm wondering if Hugo now has had a second life, second breath put into them here. They're going to try and put some good pace out, but pitting now, I think it's an interesting choice. Obviously, it's probably because they don't want to try and take Foch back on track. I imagine their aim here, Jesse, is to try and get the undercut and hopefully come out ahead of Foch. But in order to do that, they need to make sure their in-lap and out-lap was incredibly fast, because it's probably not long until Samir comes into the pits himself.
I think that's going to be true. A bunch of cars in the pit lane. Soldatov, Durrett, Merrill's races Simon all in. A drive-through penalty to Simon in the 966. We'll update you on just what's going on. Valentin Berrier's in the pits. Kevin, down to you. The leaders in the pit lane executing your strategy that you said you would use in a race like this today.
It definitely looks like it. I did think that I just saw he just passed some of the guys at the back, like some of the Lamborghinis that are a bit further down the grid. Honestly, if he had the fuel, at that point I'd suggest you go longer, as he just passed the lap cars, which he now has to again when he catches up to them, which might get the likes of Samir Foch and Aaron Trout into the mix again. But yeah, this does still give him options with looking at the weather ahead and give him the most optimal tyres.
Very well spotted. I think the majority of the field agrees with you. And who am I to disagree with something that seems to be working? We see this. There used to be the old meta was coming as early as possible, and then about a year ago it was coming as late as possible. Now it's reset to hit in the middle, cut the race in half. So much of that to do with what the tire's doing, what the race conditions are like, but you love to see it. And for you, Kevin, I love seeing somebody jump into the box, Tim, and be right the very first time, absolutely nailing it. I can't get a win sometimes. You know who else can't get a win? Drive-through penalty for car 966 for diving into the chicane on the first lap, taking out car 404. Was the chicane incident where we saw the Lamborghini stranded no man's land. Drive through for car 95 for taking out car 240. Then on lap 2, turn 3, racing incident between the 197, the 95, and the 62. That is the incident that we saw with the 197 when they retired that car. And also racing incident between the 95 and the 300, Tim.
Yeah, sorry, I was just watching Barnett as they try to close the gap to Foch here. Of course, they've got a 5-second penalty, but would still love the track position on the Ferrari. We saw the incident that occurred earlier that put the Aston behind Aaron Chow, though, and Barnett both pit this lap. Foch will now take the lead of this race. For now, of course, that's only provisional until they have to pit, but Foch seems to be steaming ahead in this race. Has done some great pace so far. We've got a race replay coming. This is Andre Dixon Chen going straight into a wall there, making some bad contact. So I think they're probably going to be looking at quite a lot of damage if they've not disconnected there, although they usually phase through the wall if they do that. But yeah, I think we've got to see what Foch does here. There's still real potential for them to find their way onto that podium. Of course, they still have to close on the cars ahead, which was Aaron Trout and... Wait, were they already on the podium? Was Foch back on the podium? No, they weren't.
No.
We had Soldatov
No,
up there, didn't we?
Yeah,
where's
Konstantin Soldatov and Chamberlain.
Oh yeah, there they are. Sorry, down in just behind Barrier. That's where we expect them to be. They've just not updated the leaderboard quite yet. But yeah, so Foch looking to come out again behind Aaron Trout. Will be trying to close that gap as quick as possible. Here's a replay of Michael races. Looks like they go towards the inside, maybe make a bit of contact with another car on that corner. Was it Soldatov, I think, maybe involved in that? Or no, it might have been another driver. But either way, a bit of contact there from races. But yeah, a lot of cars now, Jesse, coming into the pits, and I've got to say I agree with you. It's nice to have someone new in the box that gets things right, especially when we're so used to just making gambles and guesses that always appears to be wrong on Fridays.
Well, I've so often said, "Oh, well, this is what I think that somebody's going to do," and then it doesn't happen. I did get one thing right, and I would rather have not have gotten it right. I mentioned at the end of last week's broadcast, I mentioned at the start of today's broadcast, there is some kind of jinx for Savalainen here at Imola, and I can't explain it. He was on championship pace the first ever season of Night Owl he ever participated in. This was the track that it was undoing, and that's why I remember it so vividly. Raced in all sorts of championships, as I said. Didn't matter if it was a cup competition, a single make, a GT3, a GT4, you get the picture. He's always had a jinx here for some reason. Uh, yeah, I think this is more than 10 races now. He's only ever finished a couple of them. He's only ever won one. He's got about 4 or 5 poles that I'm aware of, and just nothing real to show for it other than that one win. Today goes to show you the severity of the problem. Absolutely nothing Savalainen could have done. Connectivity issues take him out of this race, and for the time being, Tim Peck, it's going to take him out of the championship conversation.
For the time being, yeah, but obviously they won at Silverstone, didn't they? So already off to a good start. This will now be their drop round for the championship. But I believe there's, what, 6 races left in this championship? They're going to be on the back foot now, making sure they don't make any more mistakes. They need to make sure that they don't have any more DCs like that as well, because obviously that was just an issue outside of their control. But that's something that's going to be playing on their mind now until the end of this championship. You've got a lot of races left. You can't have another mistake, because if so, you're just going to lose your championship lead. So that's going to be playing on Savalainen's mind. They're now slightly on the back foot here, having to defend that lead position. But then again, a lot of other cars that are similar there. Jardier used their drop round today as well. Not going to be too much stress in Savalainen. And again, they just need to hope the rest of the championship goes well for them. Well, here's where Grande, after the most of pit stops happened. There's 2 more pit stops to come. I believe they'll be ahead of Gasly, behind Foch, but that puts them up into 9th place. And I may be wrong by this, but I believe they were somewhere around 15th, 16th when they pitted. So that's going to be a huge undercut for the 404 Lamborghini.
Well, it's been a really good pit stop for a couple of cars. Keep in mind, Aaron Trout was able to get by Chamberlain whenever there was light contact. Well, I wouldn't say light contact, or maybe, actually, no, I take that back. There wasn't contact made earlier. I don't know what I'm saying, but some of the final cars coming in, Valentin Berrier goes back to the point. Samir Foch is down and gone, and the Barrel Kid Racing 420 Ferrari. And we'll see exactly where they come out. Here comes Aaron Trout, who will go by in the 999. Bosch is P4. Will he hang on to that? No, he will not. Chamberlain will go through for P4. So Foch didn't gain a spot there, but may have gained just a little bit of time. 2.1 seconds the gap now up into 4th place, or to 4th place for Samir Foch, who has come from the back half of the top 10 into a position of real threat here. Kevin, to you, talking about Hugo Merrill's hit it earlier than everybody else, could that have been defensively used as sort of a timeout? Get me out of this position, maybe change some things on the car, get back into the fight, because he was going backwards in a hurry prior to that stop.
Definitely looks like it's helped him, seeing as he now is fighting Samir Foch. So definitely looking forward to this little battle here, as they're very close together. I think now going towards, where is that? Acqua Minerale, towards Variante Alta. So let's see how this battle continues, and it definitely seems like it's helped Meros.
Certainly has. Tim pointed out something earlier. I didn't even think about it, but yeah, when he got past, did Hugo, he didn't actually fall off the back of Samir Foch. It looked like Merrill's was free falling through the field, but was able to latch back on. And after the pit stop cycle, rather unfortunately for Hugo, hasn't been able to use that early stop to do the undercut here. They are basically exactly where they were prior to the stop. Everybody still in the race finished their required 25-second pit stop for the day. A couple of outstanding penalties still. That will just be added on to the end of their race time. Speaking of penalties, drive through for car 30 for taking out car 329. That on lap 3. Racing incident between the 329 and the 404. Racing incident between the 329 and the 699. Minor contact there. 15-second penalty for car 8 for spinning the 699. 5-second penalty for car 256 for forcing the 51 off track. And a warning for car 51 for moving under braking. It hasn't got easier for the stewards today, Tim.
It certainly hasn't. It has certainly claimed a lot of victims here today. It's been quite a rough race for a lot of drivers out there. I believe we've had 7 DNFs so far, most of them due to just having too much damage from an accident that they got caught up in. Unfortunately, some of course were out of driver control and came down to a hardware issue, but either way, Imola has claimed a lot of victims here today. It's definitely been a very rough track as another driver there goes for a spin. That's the 888 Ferrari there, losing grip on the corner, does manage to recover, but in the process lets through Lele and Climbs. They climb up a couple of positions. Climbs now trying to get another one off Lele, goes to pushes them out of the corner there and will be ahead by the time we get down to the next one. Climbs now hoping to climb through the field, pardon the pun there, as again it looks like Lele's had a bit of an incident. That's going to force them back into the clutches of the Ferrari yet again, and now it just looks like the Aston is trying to recover some speed on the track after having a couple of turns of bad grip. Looks like they've gone wide there as well. That's going to open the door around the outside for Aquaman and Raleigh, but I doubt they'll go for it because, again, it's one of those corners where there's not a lot of grip on the outside. If you do try and make a move around the car, you're going to regret it. And again here, it's tempting straight to try and get alongside someone. You can get a really good exit out of Aquaman and Raleigh, but you can't be alongside them by the time you get to the chicane, because if 2 cars go for it together, one of them's going to hit the curb on and they spin. It's going to cause a lot of trouble. Christian Brock goes down towards the inside of races here, dives down the inside, gets the move done, through before the chicane is over. Jesse, what a move from Brock there. Made it look easy to overtake him when we know it's definitely not.
Yeah, I think races made that easy. That might be the first pass we've seen all day where there was just a little bit of cooperation. Races realizing Bach is sort of out of position, was in the top 10 earlier as we documented, and maybe saw the speed of that GTR. Of course, the GTR, still a viable weapon. Christian Bach has gone a long way, the GC Racing driver, in proving that you can, in a pro setting, continue to use the outdated GTR and score good finishes. He's kept up that work in recent months as well. Had a horrible race 1 week ago, but that has not deterred him, and still marching back towards the top 10. But just excellent sportsmanship by Races. Figured, you caught me, there's no way I'm going to keep this position regardless. Kind of just gave him all the room possible without running off the racetrack, allowing the pass to happen. Lose less time that way. That's probably what Races is trying to do in that instant. Hugo Merrill's, though, continuing to follow behind Samir Foch. Kevin, equal machinery. They look like they're on equal pace. How does Hugo Merrill's make this pass?
At this point, with still 90 minutes to go, say try and wait for a mistake from Foch. Even though that is unlikely, all he needs to do is stay large in that rearview mirror, try and keep up, and just spot a mistake and then capitalize. Otherwise, in the last couple minutes, he'll have to go for something.
At what point, Kevin, if you're Hugo Merrill's, do you make a do you make a desperate move with 18 minutes to go? Do you wait late in the race, or are you content with 6th place, knowing that a lot of your competitors DNF'd here today?
I mean, you'd want to finish as high as possible, but like I just said, first just wait for a mistake, and then maybe if it's like 3-4 minutes to go, the last few laps, then you might try and spot a possible dive bomb, maybe into the likes of Tosa, maybe into Rivalsa, one of the last 2 corners. Try and at least stick with him, just be big in his rear view mirror, be a nuisance, and try and force a mistake out of Samir Foch.
All right, and I get to play the teammates off of each other. For those of you that are unaware, Kevin and Tim are frequently teammates. Tim, your car, your Hugo Merrill's, do you send it?
If it's me, I'm probably still looking for that position. I'm not not sending it, absolutely not, with how Imola can be. Kodeman, they're going towards the inside of races, manages to get the position on the straight before they get down towards the corner, makes that look easy. But yeah, going back to the question, Jesse, if it's me, I'm not going to send it into a corner. I'm definitely not going to go for anything too risky, especially knowing how Imola can be, but I'm absolutely going to be still looking for that position. Even with 20 minutes left, I'm going to be just trying to assess what Foch is doing ahead of me. That being said, if I'm Hugo right now, I hate to say it, but it sounds counterintuitive. I think you need to slow down. We've seen in Hugo already in this championship
Really?
a lot of really good pace. Not literally slow down the track, but slow down in their brain as such, because they've been doing so much on track and been putting out so much great pace. And Hugo's one of those drivers that I really think could be fighting towards the front at the end of this championship. But so far, we've just seen him go backwards. It happened at Silverstone. It's happened at the beginning here today. And it's not until we get to this halfway point in the race that we see Hugo really start to get that pace back, close back in on Foch and look for the overtake. It's only because it seems that Hugo's just sort of leveled their head a bit. But you've got to remember, we've had some DNFs at the front as well. Hugo started 4th. They've gone back 2 positions. They're now in 6th. But in reality, they've probably gone back another 2 more. Like, if Salvalainen finished this race, if Brand was still up there in those positions, they're falling back into 8th place. So I think what Hugo needs to right now is just work on that consistency. Make sure that they keep that pace good, but maybe not over pushing it. Because to me, it seems what they do is they get in that car, they do some absolutely flying laps, really, really good in qualifying, have some really good pace in the race. But these little mistakes add up and it just seems to play against him. So for me, looking at Hugo Morales going into the next few races and definitely continuing this one, let's just slow down their head a little bit, maybe assess the situation. Of course, Samir Foch not likely to make a mistake, but Hugo, based on the statistics, more likely to. So what I'd like to see here is Hugo Morales just assess this for a little bit, and then I agree with Kevin. If you've got 4 minutes, 3 minutes to go, maybe look for that move, but still play it safe because it's Imola. Anything can happen here, and we know how difficult it can be racing other cars on track.
You've been working with me way too long. You start talking about the mental aspect of racing. It's real, folks. The mental part of it is a huge part of it. There's the physical ability, there's the knowledge as well, but there's also the mental part. Tim Peck, though, working with me very, very much too long. We start talking about the psychological aspect of racing. I couldn't agree more. Hugo, you two were absolutely right. He needs to think about the long term. A lot of his competitors gone today. They will undoubtedly be using their drop round. Even though Hugo didn't have a great finish in race number 1, if that's as bad as it gets and that becomes the drop round, they're going to make out with a boatload of points today. By the way, just to make sure you understand the gravity of the situation, of course, there is a drop round. Your worst finish in the entire season does not count to the final results. Why do we do that here at RCI? Some of our championships, quite simple. It keeps the championships close when your worst finish is omitted. It creates those fantastic golden goal moments, game 7 moments if you're an American, and it's just a fantastic thing, and it happens more often than not. How important is it early on? Well, if Valentin Berrier continues to win this race and have the fastest lap, they're going to get 72 points. Why is that important? Savalainen last week got a maximum 72 points, meaning week 3, we are going to have a dead tie atop the championship. Savalainen, though, will have used his drop round, of course, and on a DNF. Berrier, who can finish that race, is in better standing in my mind. So it'll be a month from now before we get a really clear picture of what happened today, how important that is in the grand scheme of things. I think it's going to be very important, but we have to wait and see.
I'm just going to pick you up on something here, Jesse, because it's a question I generally have. What happens to Salvalainen's points for pole here? Because actually, if you remember back to the beginning of this race, Barrier wasn't in that first place position. I believe first place went to Salvalainen, correct me if I'm wrong, which means technically they'd get the points of pole. Obviously, though, they haven't finished this race. They were out quite early on as well. Does that mean that the points that you get for pole position, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, it's one of those, numbers, but will that go to Barrier? Will it stay with South London? Because if
No,
so,
it,
it means
it
Barrier
stays
will
with
be
the
in
pole
second.
sitters,
Okay, so then
regardless
Barrier
of
will
what
be
you do in the
second,
race. Yeah.
which
Okay,
means
so
they'll.
Berrier wasn't on
Yeah.
pole. Savalainen got it.
Savlon got pole, which
I
means
don't.
Barrier will be sitting just a couple of points behind in the championship.
Okay.
Because it's easy to think Barrier had pole because you forget that on turn 1, Barrier just sent it down the inside and was basically in front after a
I
couple of
will fall
laps.
back to my normal defense. I'm old, and my memory's going. I do apologize for that. But yeah,
You're young at heart.
Oh, thank you. Savalainen will still hold on to the championship lead despite the fact that he will not finish today's race. But we saw Boothby a season ago carry his drop round, which was used for round 1, all the way through the championship. He didn't make a single mistake all season long. Can Savalainen do that in a season that has several more races than when Boothby did it? I don't know. It's a big ask.
It is a very big ask, and there's a lot of races yet to come. Looking at the tracks as well, we've got 8 rounds, 6 of them will be left. Hungaroring, Pool, Ricard, Zandvoort, Monza, Brands Hatch, and Nürburgring. They are circuits where racing is definitely possible. So, of course, they're going to be under pressure from the other competitors from behind. Of course, Valentin Barrier, Soldatov, Foch, Morels, Aaron Trout, Chamberlain. Like they can all be fighting those situations. It's not going to be one of those tracks that's easy to defend, and if you get pole, that's done and dusted. But then again, there are also tracks that don't pose too much risk without giving the commentators curse to anyone. They're tracks that can be quite safe to drive, barring, of course, Monza and maybe Hungaroring. The accidents can definitely happen on those tracks, but either way, I think South Line here, they could pull this off. It could be like what Boothby did last season. 1 drop round needed, and then they can just continue to push and keep winning those races and storm ahead in the championship. Though it's longer, and I think South London is definitely fighting with pressure as Barnett here, getting the slipstream towards the outside, overtakes Bughazi and will claim 7th place there, relying fully on the slipstream to get themselves round there. And Bughazi, I think, wasn't too interested in defending it. They just need to keep close to Barnett now, because Barnett has that 5-second penalty. That'll put them back behind Bughazi if Bughazi is within 5 seconds. But yeah, Jesse, I've got to agree. I think it's a long season, so you can't be too confident going into it saying, okay, I'm in the lead. Now, of course, it's a good start. It's a great confidence start, but you do have to be realistic. There's 6 rounds left. Anything can happen. You need to make sure you're on your top game every single round. And of course, it means now that South London can't use that drop round anymore. They're getting 0 points. Oh, sorry, they're getting 2 points for the pole position of this race. They won't get any points for the race because they haven't finished it. They need to finish, I believe, more than 80% of the race in order to gain points from it. So this will most likely count as their drop round here. South London needs to make sure that they are on their A game for every other round in this championship.
And for those of you keeping score at home, Konstantin Soldatov, who's had a 2nd consecutive quiet race in a row with a good finish, they're going to likely finish 2nd here today. And they were more than 4.5, 5 seconds off of Barrier. And after the pit stop, it was down to 3 seconds between the two of them. It's now going out in favor of Valentin Barrier, who's in the lead right now. And that'll be a little bit of solace for him. And Soldatov probably will not care too much. It'll be another fantastic finish, absolutely on it, and making very quiet work of it as the battle for 7th place absolutely continuing here. I was just going to say, I thought Bughazi let Barnett go a little bit too quickly earlier on, and now Bughazi and Grande both fighting it out over that spot, and that's further losing them time. Barnett is actually going to pull away. Keep in mind, if Barnett gets out to anywhere over 5 seconds, even if it's a thousandth or a hundredth of a second above 5 seconds in front of Bughazi or Grande, that's still going to secure him that position. Those two fighting behind him is exactly what he wants right now.
Yeah, that's all playing into Barnett's hands. Watching Bock there for a second as we followed them through, followed Ghostman through the corners there. So late on the brakes, that was absolutely playing to their advantage, really helping them to close the gap to the McLaren ahead. The McLaren's a car that's really well known for how good it is on the brakes as well. So Bock there being able to just be that little bit late on the brake helps them close the gap Ghostman ahead and helps him to still be competitive coming into the final 8 minutes of this race. Here we can see from the rear of Daniel Durrett climbs, who's been someone that we've seen on our screen a lot this race so far. They're looking for a way through a McLaren as well. Will Climbs be able to find something in the final 8 minutes? They've definitely been trying to push forward this entire time. And also, Jess, I just wanted to give a quick hand out to Grande. After their incident at the beginning, someone pushed all the way back down into that 17th place. They've managed to climb all the way back up now into 8th, which I believe is just 5 down from where they started. They started in that 3rd place position, so not bad in terms of the loss that they could have had here today. Managed to minimize that and gain some good points at Imola for a race that looked like it was over almost at the beginning here. Climbs looking towards the inside as we approach the final 2 corners. Has so much more speed and acceleration here coming out of the chicane. Looks like they're going to be on the inside as well as they reach the second to last corner. Can Duet hold on to it? They're still alongside, but a slight touch on them sends Duet off the track. Then they'll pick up the gravel and Climbs will go straight on through. I'm wondering if Climbs will maybe feel that they played a part in that, maybe return the position, but either way, Climbs finds their way through here. Duet falls down into that 16th place. But Kevin, looking at the time left in the race, we've got 6 minutes and 42 seconds. It's now entering that area where drivers that were following cars like Climbs here, who has actually returned the position, looking at those cars that were trying to find their way through here, is this now the time where maybe those that were just following start to push a little bit? Or are you still saying they should just keep it safe, maybe follow a little bit longer?
We're now entering that territory where you might try and do a lunge, which you wouldn't do earlier on in the race. As we can see, it's already getting close between Durrett and Kleins. So hopefully we'll see a couple more. It might be that couple more guys start to push, so especially the guys that are only like a second behind. Try and see if we can see those gaps close, and then we might be in for a couple of lunges.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely going to happen as well. It's a great point you make there. It's getting into that territory, but overtakes are definitely likely to happen. You can see Climbs really desperate to find their way back through Durrett as well. A bit of a debate going on in the chat here about whether there was actually, sorry, in the
what are you laughing at,
here,
Tim?
About whether the Climbs gave back a position there, or whether Climbs just succumbing to the Porsche and its terrible speed.
Oh, Andre!
What's happened here?
Big crash for Andre Timofeyev. That is very strange.
Oh, it looks like they have like an initial going off there, and then just trying to get back on the track, spin the car completely the wrong way around. They're just able to recover, but very late into the race, that's going to put them right down into last position. It's going to be so far behind number 30 Mercedes as well. That's not how you want to be ending your race here at Imola. They look really, really damaged.
Something's wrong with that race car.
Along, and
what in the world?
Oh, if they can't make it to the pits, they might have to DNF here. But I imagine now they've just got to try and get to the pits, because if they finish, they can still get full points for this race. But that they need to try and make it to the pits. Actually, they might have just passed the 90%, 80% window. I can't remember what it is, but not what you want to have in the last few minutes. It's definitely not what you're going to want to be dealing with. And you can see Andre just so slow, having to go off track to let cars through as well, so that they're not a danger. So now it looks like they're picking up a little bit of
I
speed
think that's
as they
exactly
rejoin
what
the
he was
track.
doing, Tim. I think that's exactly what he was doing. He was letting all the leaders and all the people fighting go through before he even attempted to get back onto the racetrack or assess it. Now that's sportsmanlike behavior from Andre, but still unsure exactly what caused that. That it almost looked like he had an e-brake on and the car went spinning like a top. I don't know if before we saw the replay pictures there was contact with something or very strange. It just spinning like a top. Unusual behavior, especially halfway down the straight. You would almost assume contact or ran off the racetrack or something of that sort. Fight still for a top 10 spot, or Gozman fighting Nagazi for that particular ride of 9th place. Don't look too far back in the mirror. Christian or Bach in the background as well, trying to return the GTR back to the top 10. You might just get it done. Kevin, down to you. You have an update from the battle for 5th.
The battle for 5th, yes. It seems like Morales has now dropped like 3.5 seconds behind Foch. Foch is actually trying to go for Chamberlain now. He's just beyond a second away from Chamberlain, so maybe we can see something happening in the last couple minutes.
Looking at the replay here, this is after the front straight contact between these two cars, sending Lele off a little bit there. That's very unfortunate contact. Both those cars have had their issues today. The 8 being the having the lion's share, you would argue. I think that was Lawrence they had the contact with at that particular time. But like Kevin said, the battle for fifth pretty much over as Merrill's, who fell off at the end of the first half of the race, having that same issue crop up here. In fact, just lost another 10th or so. Soldatov has fallen off another 4 or 5 tenths. Christian Bach going for 10th place, looking up the inside, and it's just about going to be there. Will there be enough room? Yes, there will. But the BMW Magazi not allowing any extra room. The block there on the inside, over-under maneuver from Christian Bach. The GC Racing GTR is going to have him look. Top 10 again for the GTR. Top 10 for Christian Bach. What a move. What a setup.
That was a great move from Bach there, and that was on the Magazi didn't seem to be wanting to let go as well. We were discussing whether maybe Magazi was letting through some of the other drivers, but Bach certainly wasn't one of them. Managed to do that off pure fighting alone. It's a shame because Magazi in the top 10, that would have been a great result for them as well, and I was quite excited to see it too. But Bach in the top 10, good result for them. The Ghostman as well up there in the top 10 is going to be a great result for them as well. Will Bach be able to close that gap? They've only got about a minute left to do so. If they want to catch up with the McLaren ahead, so maybe won't be possible for them, but it's still worth trying for the Nissan there. Maybe they can make up another position and get up into 9th, but looking now, Foch has managed to catch up with Harley Chamberlain. Watch Foch climb through the field this entire race so far. Harley Chamberlain's had a good race, sitting in that 4th place position for a while, maybe wanting to just oil their car a little bit, try and get back in the flow of things, because they so far have probably been the mindset of their own, just doing laps and not really having to fight anyone. Now it's up to them to fight off Foch in the last couple of seconds of this race. They probably have, let's see, where's the leader on the track? Oh, it's going to be tight, but I don't think they're going to get another lap after the next one. They're going to have one more lap after this to sort this battle out. Will they be able to do it? Well, we'll see. But either way, Bosch here has some steam of a race so far. Close the gap to Chamberlain. Can they make it happen? Can they pull off this overtake? It's certainly going to be interesting, but doesn't have long left to do it yet.
Sure doesn't. And just a couple of housekeeping things on our end. There was a racing incident between the 51 and the 256. A warning for car 256, a warning for car 28, a warning for car 11, and a no further action between the 329 and the 300. So no actual penalties coming out since the last time we brought it to you. And also our fantastic broadcaster, I should say, pointing out what happened to the 888. They have come across the line. Valentin Berrier has won this race. Konstantin Soldatov has come across the line in 2nd. Aaron Trout will finish 3rd. Who will finish 4th? That's the question. Harley Chamberlain holds on to that position in the 725 Honda, and I think he's safe. Samir Foch put up a fantastic fight. Couldn't quite get back to 4th, or get up to 4th, I should say, but a fantastic run into P5 for him. Certainly interesting to watch. Hugo Merrill's hangs on for 6th place. Barnett will come across the line 7th, but won't get to keep that spot, as Grande was able to match the pace of the 256 and will take back over 7th place. For Gozman, I think, will be too far behind to pick up any additional spot, and will, so they will finish 9th place. Christian Bach, though, a top 10. Magazi Koterman races, Simon climbs, Horst Durrett, Lele, Timo Fiev, I should say. The 19 finishers today. Daniel Durrett got a drive-through penalty right at the end there of the race. Crazy stuff. As I was saying, the 888 had the spinning like a top explained by our fantastic broadcaster Stewie, who said they caught the bump after the off track is what caused that particular situation. Thanks for that explanation, Stewie. As always, our eye of the sky, keeping us abreast. But what a race it was for Valentin Berrier. Did everything right. Started on the front row, had work to do, did it in fantastic form. Kevin Boss, your thoughts on today's race here at Imola?
Was very interesting. Lots of overtakes, lots of incidents as well. It really was as I expected with the tight nature of the track. It happened a bit earlier and in positions in turns where I didn't expect it. But yeah, I think overall it's been a very, very good race.
Just to keep you up to date as well, Daniel Duret's drive-through penalty was not steward related. That was for track limits. Our only ACC assigned penalty of the day. Tim Peck, Berrier ran a fantastic race out front. Absolute heartbreak for Savalainen, who was stalking him for the win. Samir Foch comes through the field. Hugo Merrils falls to the field for a second week in a row. A lot of takeaways from today. What's your thoughts?
I think there's some phenomenal racing out there today. Foch climbed through the field really, really well and got themselves up into, I believe it's fourth by the end of the race there. Harley Chamberlain as well, just managing to hold on to that pace, secured them podium finish. No, I'm one person two up there. Harley Chamberlain finished fourth and Foch finished fifth, didn't they? But yes, so Trov, sorry, in second place got a good finish. Aaron Trout found themselves a podium as well. I do have to mention for Mawson, who's a fellow broadcaster and commentator here, that a Bentley did win this race and that a Bentley is definitely still as a good manufacturer of a car. Bentleys are the best. We love Bentleys, and that's for Mawson, who has been watching along this race as well. But yeah, some absolutely brilliant drives. Grande as well. Just after that instant, that right at the beginning of the race, that could have ended their race right there. And I know a lot of drivers that would have maybe been very disheartened by that, probably even given up if they'd fallen that far down through the field. But sticking with it, and Grande has just brought so many positions back and ended up finishing 7th place after the penalties. I mean, that's just a phenomenal drive. At the end of the day, I've got to give my hand to them, because I think that's just absolutely amazing on their part, sticking with it and climbing back through the field. But in terms of Imola, always delivers as a track for me. It's the first track I ever commentated on, Jesse, and it continues to be one of my favourites to commentate on, because every time we come here at RCI, there's always some great action, some great racing out on track, and just some great stories to tell as well. So I think today's race has been absolutely phenomenal.
Well, one of those strange races. It is Spooktober, however, so you got to worry about all the crazy shenanigans, don't you? And we certainly had those today. The story, not necessarily the cars that finished the race. It's more about the cars that weren't here or did not finish the race. Of course, Jardier not here. We know he's going to miss several other races this season. And, of course, Savalainen having internet issues, not able to finish the race today, taking him out of what could have been another fantastic finish. Berrier wins the race going away, and so many other cars fighting throughout the field. I think the big takeaway for the drivers that did get to see the checkered flag today was, well, a lot of points for drivers that needed them. Some really fantastic battles as well. Of course, we'll be back with you in 1 week's time at the Hungaroring to continue this championship. Hungaroring always races well in RCI races. I don't know what it is. The format, the drivers, probably a mix of all of that. We have had some fantastic races. I don't think that we're going to have anything different in 1 week's time. And of course, you can catch us on Thursday, the continuation of the GT4 and Porsche Cup Multi-Class Championship Thursdays. And we'll see you next week here. No night out this weekend. They're off for EWC. Just a reminder, go to racerci.com and join us if you like what you saw. Why not get involved? See you on a racetrack upcoming. And it doesn't matter what your skill level is, we have a split for you. RaceRCI.com. Trying to get Valentin Berrier in here. Would love to have a word from him tonight. See if we can't usher him in. In the meantime, I'm going to thank our lovely partners, AK Informatica, for providing our server solutions. Driver 61. You can get 25% off your driver coaching by going to driver61.com. Driver coaching can make you a better sim racing driver. It's worked for several of the admins here at RCI because, well, we used our own 25% off code. Apparently, we're allowed to do that. We did do that, and it worked. Some trophies to certainly prove that. And of course, Fanatec, when making quality purchases of sim racing hardware at fanatec.com, use our affiliate link. Doesn't cost you a single thing, and it tells them that we sent you. It helps with things like server cost when you use it. Thank you very much for those of you that have in the past. We are joined by Valentin Barrier in the booth with us. Welcome back, Barrier. It's been quite a long time. What took you so long?
I don't know what took me so long. Thank you. I don't know what took me so long, but it definitely took too long. But I'm glad to be at the top again.
Well, you're here now. That's the only thing that was important. What a fantastic start that you had. Talk us through the initial couple of laps of the race, getting into position, fighting Savalainen, and obviously a scary moment seeing him sort of
Yeah,
drift off the racetrack there.
yeah. I actually had a messy start where I completely messed up the lining at the start. So Savalainen actually started ahead of me. So then I had to be aggressive in the first couple of corners. I managed to get ahead of him again. And yeah, I think it was like lap 3. Was right behind me, and suddenly I saw him going right straight across the track into the wall. So that was very scary. And then I just had to do clean race without any mistakes. And there was actually Soldatov behind me who was keeping up with me with a really decent pace. So I knew that I just had to keep up the pace, not make any mistakes, and thankfully that's what I did, and I won.
Well, we have a lot of Bentley fans here on staff, and you made them all proud today, Valentin. Let me just tell you that. Getting Bentley another win. I'm going to hand you over to Tim Peck. He's going to have a couple of questions for you.
Obviously, you've had a brilliant race here today. You got pole position, you had fastest lap, you won the race. That's going to be max points. What are your thoughts towards the end of this championship? Of course, there's 6 more rounds left here in the season. You still got a drop round if you need to use it as well. And your result in the first race wasn't bad. You came 6th place at Silverstone. But what are your thoughts on this championship? Obviously, it's a long one left to come. And what's your plan here? Are you just going to continue to try and get these wins here, or are you going to maybe just see if you could get some good results and not worry too much about pushing to the limit?
I'm. It's obviously a very long championship, as you've been saying, but I'm gonna try to be as fast as possible every race to see if by some miracle I can win the championship with the Bentley. But I think it's gonna be very difficult with some of the tracks that are really not good for this car. But yeah, let's just see what happens.
Obviously, as well, you mentioned that you chose the Bentley. I know Ryan Mawson, one of our commentators here, loves the fact that you're driving the Bentley into championship. What made you choose the Bentley as a car? Is it a favorite of yours? Is it one that you have to drive, or do you just really enjoy the challenge of driving the Bentley?
Uh, it's it's a car that I saw got completely abandoned uh recently, and I quite like the car, how it drives, and I know that it still has um enough pace, sorry, the car for it to still be good in most of the tracks. So I took it to show people that it's not a reason to abandon this car because it still has good pace.
Brilliant. Well, I know there's some people in the chat that would definitely agree with you on that one. They'd love to see the Bentley coming back into action. It's one of those cars, as you said, that sort of slipped under the belt in recent years. But going back to Jesse Lee now, well done again, by the way, Valentin. Absolutely beautiful race out there, and pole position, fastest lap, and first place. That's going to get you some good points. Brilliant job so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, Valentin, absolutely fantastic, and I got to say, just well done driving today. The pictures don't quite do it justice. You were never more than about 5 seconds away from your next nearest competitor. What's it like to drive under pressure for a consecutive hour, knowing that you cannot make mistakes?
It was actually quite oppressing The gap got down after the pit stop. The gap got down to just 3 seconds actually. But yeah, it was. I knew that he wasn't gonna completely catch me because it's not like he was half a second faster than me every lap, but he was here and there a tenth, maybe 2 tenths faster sometimes. But yeah, I was impressed by him keeping up and closing the gap even at some point. And yeah, it was good.
Well, congratulations on a race well ran and a very deserving victory today. I think you've tied yourself with Savalainen for the championship points lead. Of course, he will use his drop round for this race, and your sixth place, as it stands today, is your drop round. I think you're in the better position, but still tied at 72 points apiece up at the top. I love that spirit of I'm going to try to do all I can. Ladies and gentlemen, your winner of the day here at Imola, Valentin Berrier. What a great race it was. And just, I will say, like I said, the pictures will not do it justice. Just a brilliant drive by him all day long. Folks, thanks for being with us today. On your way out, drop a like, subscribe. Less than 20 subs away from 4,200 subs here on YouTube. We'd love to hit that by the end of the month. Every little bit counts. Our next broadcast on the channel will be next Thursday, the continuation of the multi-class championship there. Of course, we'll be back with you on Friday, and in 1 week's time, Night Owl will return off this weekend for WC. Well, on behalf of everybody on the broadcast team, I've been Jesse Lee, joined by Tim Peck and Kevin Boss. Stewie behind the cameras. On behalf of our fantastic race control box and our stewards and the entire admin team here at RCI, thank you for watching. But until next time, have a good night.